The classified file sat in a reinforced vault at the Pentagon, marked Eyes Only, Declassified 1995. When military historian Colonel David Bradford opened it in March 1996, he found a single sheet of paper inside. Not a report, not an official document. Just one handwritten line in Japanese, with an English translation paper-clipped beneath it. The handwriting was shaky, written by someone whose hands were trembling. The paper was stained, mud, blood, and what might have been tears. At the bottom, a note in different handwriting, written by Captain Takeshi Yamada, Imperial Japanese Army, August 14, 1945, 16:47 hours. Executed by firing squad August 14, 1945, 17:03 hours. Total time allowed, 16 minutes. Authorization, Lieutenant James Holloway, against direct orders. Court-martial recommended, but war ended before proceedings. Filed and sealed per general order, 8:47. Bradford stared at that timeline. 16 minutes between writing and execution. And during those 16 minutes, something had happened that shocked everyone present. Shocked them enough that it was immediately classified and buried for 50 years. He read the Japanese line, then the translation. Father fought with honor. Father thought of you at the end. Do not be ashamed. Your name is Yamada. Remember. One line, 37 words in English. Probably fewer in Japanese. The language is more efficient. But it wasn't the line itself that had shocked everyone. It was what the American lieutenant had allowed, what he'd risked, what happened after the prisoner finished writing. Bradford pulled the accompanying file, witness statements from 8 soldiers present at the execution. Private Daniel Chen, combat photographer, had taken 3 photographs. The photos were in the file, sealed in individual envelopes marked disturbing content. Bradford opened the first envelope, black and white, grainy. A Japanese officer kneeling on muddy ground, hands tied behind his back. American soldiers standing in a semicircle, rifles ready. One officer, Lieutenant Holloway, standing apart, holding a piece of paper and a pencil. The second photograph. The Japanese officer bent forward, the American lieutenant holding the paper steady on his knee while the prisoner wrote with bound hands. The other soldiers watching, confused, some angry. The third photograph. The moment after, the execution complete. But something in the image, something in the faces of the American soldiers, showed that what they'd witnessed had changed them. Bradford read Private Chen's witness statement. We were ordered to execute Captain Yamada for war crimes, specifically ordering his men to fight after Japan's surrender announcement. Lieutenant Holloway told us to prepare the firing line. But then the prisoner asked for something. Lieutenant translated. The prisoner wanted to write one last line. For his son. Lieutenant said no, regulations forbid it. Prisoner said, Please, my son is 7. He will think his father was coward. One line, prove I died with honor. Please. Lieutenant hesitated. Then he violated direct orders, gave the prisoner paper and pencil. The prisoner, with tied hands, wrote one line in Japanese. Took him 6 minutes. His hands were shaking so badly. When he finished, he looked at Lieutenant and said in English, Thank you. You give my son his father back. Now I can die as samurai. Then Lieutenant did something that shocked all of us. He bowed to the prisoner, a full formal bow, Japanese style. The prisoner bowed back, as much as he could with tied hands. Then we executed him. I've killed dozens of Japanese soldiers in combat, never thought about their families, but after watching Lieutenant bow to a man we were about to kill, after seeing that line written with shaking hands, I couldn't stop thinking, that man had a son. Someone who will never know his father died with dignity. Lieutenant was right to violate orders. Some things matter more than regulations. Bradford sat back, absorbing this. An American lieutenant had bowed to an enemy he was about to execute, had given him dignity in his final moments, had allowed him to leave one line for a son who'd never know his father except through those 37 words. And for 50 years, this story had been classified, hidden, buried in a Pentagon vault because it complicated the narrative. Because mercy toward the enemy, especially an enemy being executed, didn't fit the official story of the Pacific War. But now, 50 years later, Bradford could tell it, could reveal what happened on that muddy field on August 14, 1945, could show that even in war's darkest moments, even at an execution, humans could choose compassion over cruelty. This is that story, not sanitized, not simplified. The raw truth of what happened when an American officer allowed an enemy prisoner to write one last line before dying. August 11, 1945. Forward Operating Base, Okinawa. 14:30 hours. Lieutenant James Holloway sat in a muddy foxhole, reading a letter that had taken 9 weeks to reach him. The envelope was battered, waterlogged at one edge, but his wife's handwriting was still legible. Dear James, Robert is walking now. He took his first steps on June 3rd. I cried for an hour, partly from joy, partly because you weren't here to see it. He's so much like you, determined, stubborn. When he wants something, he doesn't quit until he gets it. Mrs. Patterson from church asked about you yesterday. I told her you're fighting in the Pacific. She said she prays for you every Sunday. I pray for you every minute. James, I don't know how to say this, so I'll just write it. I'm terrified. Not just that you'll die, though God knows that fear never leaves me, but that you'll come home changed. That the war will have turned you into someone I don't recognize. My father fought in the Great War. He came home in 1919, but he never really came home. You know what I mean. His body was there, but his soul stayed in France. He drank. He had nightmares. He couldn't hold our baby sister without shaking. Promise me you won't let the war take you completely. Promise me you'll stay the man I married. The man who cried at our wedding. The man who spent 2 hours trying to save a bird with a broken wing. The man who believes people are fundamentally good. Please come home, James. Come home whole. All my love. Margaret Holloway folded the letter carefully and put it in his breast pocket next to his heart. Next to the photograph of Margaret holding baby Robert. He was 32 years old. Before Pearl Harbor, he'd been a high school English teacher in Portland, Oregon. Shakespeare, Dickens, Hemingway. He'd loved teaching, loved that moment when students understood a complex passage, when literature made them see the world differently. Then, December 7, 1941. He'd enlisted January 3, 1942. Officer Candidate School, 3.5 years in the Pacific. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, now Okinawa. He'd killed men, ordered men to kill, watched friends die, done things that would have horrified the high school teacher he'd been. But he'd tried to stay human, tried to remember Margaret's words. Promise me you'll stay the man I married. Lieutenant, Sergeant Bill Morrison appeared at the foxhole entrance. Colonel wants to see you. Says it's urgent. Holloway climbed out, his uniform caked with mud and dried blood. Not his own. The base was barely operational. Tents, ammunition crates, men sleeping in holes dug into Okinawan soil. Colonel Patterson sat at a field desk in what passed for a command tent. Maps covered every surface. Radio equipment crackled with static. Holloway, we've got a situation. Sir? You speak Japanese, correct? Yes, sir. Studied it in college. Been using it for interrogations. Good. We've captured a Japanese captain. Takeshi Yamada, 32nd Regiment. Refused to surrender even after the Emperor's broadcast. Kept fighting. Got 16 of his men killed in the process. How many days ago was the broadcast? 3 days. August 8th, the Emperor announced unconditional surrender. This captain ignored it. Kept his men fighting. We had to kill most of them to take him alive. Holloway felt something cold settle in his stomach. And now? Now we execute him. Tomorrow morning, 17 hours. War crime, continuing combat after official surrender. You're in charge of the firing squad. I need you because you speak Japanese. Make sure he understands why he's dying. Sir, with respect, the war is over. We won. Why execute a prisoner? Patterson's face hardened. Because he got American boys killed after the war was over. Because he violated the surrender terms. Because we need to send a message that defying orders has consequences. Are we sure he heard the broadcast? Communications have been... He heard it. We found a radio in their position. He knew. He chose to keep fighting anyway. Patterson stood. This isn't a debate, Lieutenant. You have your orders. Execution scheduled for August 14th, 17 hours. Prepare your men. And Holloway, make it clean. I don't want this prisoner to suffer unnecessarily. Quick and professional. Yes, sir. Holloway left the tent feeling sick. He'd killed in combat, that was war. But executing a prisoner felt different. Felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. That night he couldn't sleep. Lay in his foxhole thinking about Captain Yamada. Who was he? What had made him refuse surrender? Did he have a family? Was there someone waiting for him in Japan, not knowing he was about to die? Around 03R, Holloway pulled out his journal, a leather-bound notebook where he'd been writing throughout the war, trying to process what he was seeing, what he was becoming. He wrote, "Tomorrow I execute a man I've never met. A man who, in different circumstances, I might have liked. A man who was probably a teacher or farmer or father before the war turned him into a soldier. Margaret asked me to stay the man she married. But how do I stay that man while doing this? How do I execute a prisoner and still call myself human? The war is over. We won. This man poses no threat. But orders are orders. Duty is duty. God forgive me for what I'm about to do." He didn't write anything else, just sat there until dawn, trying to reconcile the English teacher who'd cried at his wedding with the officer who'd kill a prisoner in less than 14 hours. August 14th, 1945, 15 hours. 2 hours before execution, Holloway gathered his firing squad. 7 men, all veterans, all exhausted, all ready for the war to be over so they could go home. Listen up. We're executing a Japanese captain at 17 hours. War crime. Continued combat after surrender. It'll be quick and clean. Questions? Private Daniel Chen raised his hand. "Lieutenant, why are we executing him? War's over." "Because he refused to accept that. Kept his men fighting. Got Americans killed after the surrender." "But..." "No buts, Chen. We have orders. We follow them." But even as Holloway said it, he felt hollow. Sergeant Morrison spoke up. "Sir, I've fought this whole damn war. Killed more Japanese than I can count. But executing a prisoner feels different. Feels wrong." "I know." Holloway's voice was quiet. "I know it does. But we're soldiers. We follow orders even when they feel wrong. Especially when they feel wrong. That's what discipline means." But was he saying that to convince them or himself? At 16:30, they brought Captain Yamada from the holding area. He was small, maybe 5'6", thin from malnutrition. His uniform was torn and filthy. His hands were tied behind his back. But he walked with dignity, head high. Holloway studied him. The man didn't look like a fanatic. Didn't look like someone who'd willingly get his men killed. He looked tired, sad, resigned. They positioned him at the execution spot, a muddy clearing 50 yards from the main camp. 7 soldiers formed a line, rifles ready. Holloway approached the prisoner, a translator at his side. Though Holloway's Japanese was good enough, he wanted official translation on record. "Captain Yamada, do you understand why you're being executed?" Through the translator. "Yes. I refused surrender. I kept my men fighting. I accept responsibility. Do you have any final words?" Yamada looked directly at Holloway. His eyes were calm, accepting. "May I ask one thing? Not mercy, not life. Just one thing?" "What?" "May I write one line? For my son? He is 7. After I die, he will hear stories that his father was soldier, but he will not know what kind of man his father was. One line, to tell him I died with honor. Please." The translator finished. The other soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Holloway felt something crack inside his chest. This condemned man, this enemy who'd been fighting after surrender, his last thought wasn't self-preservation. It was his son. A 7-year-old boy who'd grow up without a father and might be ashamed of him. Regulations were clear. Prisoners being executed were allowed no personal effects, no messages, no final communications beyond verbal last words. But Holloway thought about his own son, Robert, barely walking. If Holloway died tomorrow, what would he want Robert to know? That his father had followed orders? Or that his father had tried to stay human? "Lieutenant," Morrison whispered. "Regulations say." "I know what regulations say." Holloway pulled a notebook from his pocket, tore out a page, found a pencil. "Captain Yamada, you have 5 minutes. Write your line." The translator gasped. "Sir, you can't." "I just did. Translate. Tell him 5 minutes." Yamada's eyes widened. "You allow?" "Yes. 5 minutes. 1 line. For your son." Yamada bowed his head, as much as he could with tied hands. "Thank you. You give mercy when you not have to. You are good man." Holloway untied Yamada's hands, ignoring the alarmed reactions from his squad. 5 minutes, then we proceed." He handed the paper and pencil to Yamada, who knelt in the mud, placed the paper on his knee, and began to write. His hands shook so badly the first characters were nearly illegible. But he steadied himself, focused, wrote with care. 6 minutes passed. The squad waited in tense silence. Finally, Yamada finished. He looked at what he'd written, then folded the paper carefully and held it out to Holloway. "Please, send to my family. Yamada household, Nagoya. Address on back. Please." Holloway took the paper. "What does it say?" Through tears, Yamada translated his own words. "Father fought with honor. Father thought of you at the end. Do not be ashamed. Your name is Yamada. Remember." 1 line. 37 words. A father's final message to a son he'd never see again. Holloway felt something break inside him. This man, this enemy, was just a father. Just like Holloway was a father. Both of them trying to leave something behind. Both of them hoping their sons would remember them as good men. And Holloway was about to kill him. "Captain Yamada." Holloway's voice was rough with emotion. "You are a good father. Your son will be proud." Yamada smiled, genuine warmth despite his circumstances. "And you are good man. You allow last dignity. When you go home to your son, because you will live. I know. Tell him. Enemy soldier said his father was brave, was merciful, was human even in war. Your son will be proud too." Then Yamada did something that shocked everyone present. He bowed to Holloway, not a small nod, a full, deep, formal Japanese bow. The bow of profound respect and gratitude. Holloway understood the significance. In Japanese culture, this bow meant, "You have honored me. I recognize your sacrifice. I am grateful." And without thinking, operating purely on instinct and emotion, Holloway bowed back. Same depth, same formality, same respect. The Americans watching gasped. Chen's camera clicked, capturing the moment. When they straightened, Yamada said in English, "Now I can die a samurai. Thank you." Holloway retied Yamada's hands, gently, with apology in every motion. Positioned him at the execution spot. Walked to stand with his squad. "Ready." 7 rifles raised. "Aim." 7 rifles pointed at Yamada's heart. Yamada closed his eyes. Whispered something, probably a prayer. "Fire." 7 rifles fired simultaneously. Yamada fell, dead before he hit the ground. Just as Holloway had promised, quick and clean. But as Holloway stood there, holding that piece of paper with one last line written in shaking Japanese characters, he knew that something profound had just happened. He'd killed a man, but he'd also given that man dignity in death, had allowed him to be a father in his final moments, had shown mercy when regulations said show none. And for that brief moment, between tying the hands and ordering the execution, they hadn't been enemies. They'd been 2 fathers. 2 men trying to stay human in a war that tried to make everyone monsters. August 14th, 1945. 18:45 hours, 90 minutes after execution, Colonel Patterson stared at Lieutenant Holloway with barely contained rage. "You did what?" "I allowed the prisoner to write a final message to his family, sir. In direct violation of regulations regarding execution protocols." "Yes, sir." "You untied his hands." Yes, sir, for 6 minutes. He was surrounded by 7 armed soldiers. He posed no threat. That's not the fucking point, Lieutenant. Patterson slammed his fist on the desk. The point is we have rules. Regulations exist for a reason. You don't get to ignore them because you feel sorry for the enemy. Holloway stood at attention, face neutral, but inside he was burning. Sir, with respect, the man was about to die. He asked for one small mercy. Mercy? He was being executed for war crimes. He didn't deserve mercy. He deserved to be executed as a war criminal. But he also deserved to die as a human being. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Patterson's face turned red. Don't philosophize with me, Lieutenant. You violated direct orders. Private Chen photographed you bowing to an enemy prisoner. A prisoner we were executing. Do you have any idea how that looks? It looks like respect, sir. Something we've been trying to teach the Japanese about. How can we demand they respect human dignity if we don't show it ourselves? We show it by following the goddamn rules. Holloway pulled the folded paper from his pocket. Sir, do you want to know what he wrote? In his final minutes before death, what was so important he risked asking for mercy? I don't give a damn what. Father fought with honor. Father thought of you at the end. Do not be ashamed. Your name is Yamada, remember. That's what he wrote. For his 7-year-old son, 1 line, 37 words. That's what I allowed. Patterson stared at the paper. For a moment, something shifted in his face. Maybe recognition that the enemy was human, that fathers existed on both sides. But then he locked it down. It doesn't matter what he wrote. What matters is you violated regulations. I should court-martial you. Yes, sir. You should. Don't be fucking flippant. I'm not, sir. I genuinely believe you should court-martial me. Because then we'd have to explain in official record why showing basic human decency to a condemned prisoner is court-martial worthy. We'd have to put in writing that allowing a father to leave 1 line for his son violated our values. And I'd be very interested in how that plays with the American public. Patterson's eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me, Lieutenant? No, sir. I'm pointing out reality. The war is over. We won. The story that's about to be told is, how did the winners behave? With honor or with cruelty? This piece of paper, he held it up. This is evidence that at least one American officer chose honor. If you court-martial me for that, you're saying the U.S. Army prefers cruelty. The tent was silent except for rain starting to fall outside, the constant Okinawan rain that turned everything to mud. Finally, Patterson spoke. Private Chen's photographs. Where are they? Chen has them. Sir, collect them, all of them. The photos, the negatives, this paper you're holding. Everything related to this incident gets classified. Sir, you want to avoid court-martial? Fine. But this story doesn't get out. Ever. We're going to seal these materials and bury them so deep nobody finds them for 50 years. By then everyone involved will be dead and it won't matter anymore. Holloway felt anger surge. You're going to hide this? Bury evidence that we showed mercy? I'm going to prevent this from becoming a political football. I'm going to protect you from court-martial. And I'm going to make sure your moment of philosophical weakness doesn't undermine military discipline. Patterson stood. Collect everything. Bring it to me by 22 hours. I'll personally oversee the classification. This conversation never happened. The execution was routine. Understood. And Captain Yamada's final message, his son will never receive it? His son will never know his father died with dignity instead of defiance. That's the price of your mercy, Lieutenant. You gave the father peace, but the son will always wonder. Choose your victories carefully. August 14th, 1945, 21:30 hours. Holloway sat in his foxhole, holding Captain Yamada's paper. Rain drummed on his helmet, mud everywhere. In 30 minutes, he had to deliver this to Patterson. It would be classified, sealed, buried. Yamada's son would never see it, would never know his father's last thoughts were of him. Private Chen appeared at the foxhole entrance. Lieutenant, I heard about the classification order. Yeah. Want me to make a copy before we turn everything over? Holloway looked at the paper. Making a copy would violate Patterson's direct order. Would risk actual court-martial, not just threat of it. But Yamada's son deserved to know. Do it. Hide it well. If we're caught, we won't be. I'll bury it in my personal gear. After the war, I'll find a way to get it to the family. Chen, you could be court-martialed for this. So could you, sir, for what you did today. But you did it anyway, because it was right. Chen smiled. I'm Chinese-American. My family was put in internment camps while I'm over here fighting. I understand what it's like when the government says who's human and who isn't. I'm not letting some kid grow up thinking his father was a coward when I watched that man die with more dignity than most. Holloway handed him the paper. Copy it, exactly, every character, then return the original in 20 minutes. Chen left. Holloway sat in the rain, thinking about the price of mercy, about following conscience instead of orders, about staying human in situations designed to make you monstrous. Margaret's letter was still in his pocket. Promise me you'll stay the man I married. Today he'd violated regulations, risked court-martial, created an international incident, all to let a condemned man write one line. But he'd stayed the man Margaret married, the man who believed people were fundamentally good, the man who wouldn't let war turn him into something cruel. Chen returned 20 minutes later. Done, sir. Copies buried deep, originals in my pocket, ready to deliver to the colonel. Together, they walked through the rain to Patterson's tent. Patterson was waiting. Everything? Yes, sir. Chen handed over the photographs, negatives, and original paper. Patterson examined them, then locked everything in a metal case. These materials are hereby classified top secret under General Order 847. 50-year seal. Anyone who discusses this incident faces court-martial. That includes you, Lieutenant, and you, Private. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. This conversation is over. Dismissed. Outside the tent, Chen whispered to Holloway. The copy is safe, sir. After the war, I'll make sure it reaches the family. Thank you, Chen. No, sir. Thank you. For showing us we can still be human, even here, even now. They walked back to their foxholes through the rain. The war would be officially over in hours. Japan would formally surrender September 2nd aboard the USS Missouri. But for Holloway, the war had already changed meaning. He'd learned that following orders and doing what's right weren't always the same thing. That mercy mattered more than regulations. That staying human required active choice, not passive compliance. And somewhere in Japan, a 7-year-old boy named Yamada would grow up not knowing his father had died thinking of him, not knowing an American officer had risked everything to allow that final message, not knowing that his father's last words, "Father fought with honor. Father thought of you at the end. Do not be ashamed. Your name is Yamada. Remember," had been written in shaking hands on muddy paper and then buried in classified files for 50 years. But Chen had made a copy, and someday, somehow, the truth would reach that boy. Someday he'd know his father died as a samurai, died with honor, died thinking of him. That was enough. It had to be enough. August 15th, 1945. 11 hours, the surrender. Japan's formal surrender was announced over the radio. The war was officially over. The American camp erupted in celebration. Men cheering, crying, firing weapons into the air. 3.5 years of hell, finally finished. They were going home. But Holloway sat in his foxhole, holding Margaret's letter, thinking about Captain Yamada. The man had died less than 24 hours ago, just hours before Japan surrendered. If the execution had been delayed even one day, Yamada might have lived, might have gone home to his son, might have delivered that line in person instead of on paper. The timing was cruel, unbearably cruel. Sergeant Morrison appeared. "Lieutenant, you okay?" "Just thinking." "About yesterday?" "Yeah." Morrison sat down beside him. "What you did, letting him write that line, that took guts, sir. I've been thinking about it all night. That man died with dignity because you gave him mercy. That matters." "Does it?" "Patterson buried the whole thing, classified it. That kid will never see what his father wrote. Maybe not officially, but Chen made a copy, right? He'll get it to the family somehow. And even if he doesn't..." Morrison paused. "Sir, 7 of us were there. We witnessed it. We'll remember. We'll carry that story. And someday, when someone asks us what the war was like, we won't just tell them about the killing. We'll tell them about the moment an American officer showed mercy to a condemned enemy, about the moment humanity survived even at an execution. Patterson will court-martial anyone who talks. Patterson will be retired in 10 years. The classification expires in 50, and memories don't expire at all. Morrison smiled. You did good, Lieutenant. You stayed human. That's what we're supposed to take home with us. Proof that war didn't destroy everything good about us. August 16th, 1945. 7 hours. Private Chen found Holloway cleaning his rifle. Sir, can we talk privately? They walked to the edge of camp, away from others. I've been thinking about Captain Yamada's family, Chen said. After we're discharged, I'm going back to California. My family's getting out of the internment camps. But I speak Japanese. My grandmother taught me. I can travel to Japan, find the Yamada family, deliver that line. Chen, that's dangerous. Japan will be occupied. Americans traveling around looking for specific families. I'm Chinese American, sir. I can claim family business. And I promised myself, if I survive this war, I'd do something meaningful with that survival. Delivering that message, showing that American mercy existed, that's meaningful. Holloway studied the young private, 21 years old, had seen more death than anyone should, but still believed in human decency. You're a good man, Chen. I learned from you, sir. Yesterday showed me that rules aren't more important than humanity. That mercy matters even when, especially when, it's hard. If you do this, be careful. Don't let anyone know you have classified information. Don't mention my name or the execution. Just say you met a Japanese soldier who wanted his family to have a message. Understood, sir. They shook hands. Two men who'd witnessed something profound and refused to let it be forgotten. August 20th, 1945. The squad talks that night. The 7 men of the firing squad sat together around a small fire. They'd been avoiding the topic, but finally Sergeant Morrison brought it up. We need to talk about what happened, what we saw. The lieutenant violated regulations, Private Williams said. Could have been court-martialed. Should have been, Private Rodriguez added. But he wasn't. Why? Because what he did was right, Chen said firmly. Regulations said deny mercy. Humanity said show it. Lieutenant chose humanity. But we executed the man anyway, Williams countered. What's the point of mercy if you kill him right after? Morrison answered. The point is how he died. He died as a father, not just a prisoner. He died knowing his son would understand he'd been brave. That's not nothing. Private Jackson, who'd been silent until now, spoke. I've killed 17 Japanese soldiers in combat, face to face, and I never thought of them as people. They were targets, enemies. But yesterday, watching that man write that line with shaking hands, his voice broke. That was somebody's father, and we killed him, and I don't know how to feel about that. Feel human, Holloway said, appearing from the darkness. They hadn't realized he was listening. Feel conflicted, feel sad, because that means you haven't let the war destroy your soul. He sat down with them. Listen, what we did yesterday was legal. He was a war criminal by the rules of engagement, but it was also tragic. Both things are true. We followed orders, and we killed a father. That contradiction doesn't resolve. You carry it. How do you carry it, sir? Jackson asked. By remembering, by telling the story, not to glorify war, but to show war's cost. By making sure that man's death meant something. He died with honor because we allowed it. That's the mercy we gave him. Small but real. They sat in silence, 7 men processing what they'd witnessed, what they'd done. Finally, Chen spoke. Sir, permission to make a pact? Go ahead. We 7, we witnessed something important. Let's promise we don't let it be forgotten. After the classification expires, we tell the story. We make sure people know that mercy existed. That humanity survived. That one American officer chose compassion over cruelty. One by one, they agreed, 7 men binding themselves to memory, refusing to let bureaucracy erase what they'd witnessed. August 25, 1945. Holloway's final entry. Holloway sat in his foxhole, writing in his journal for what would be the last time in the war. Today I received orders. We ship home September 10th. 15 days until I see Margaret and Robert again. 15 days until I can try to be the man I was before this war. But I'm not that man anymore. Can't be. Too much has changed. Too much has been seen and done. I keep thinking about Captain Yamada, about the line he wrote, about his son who will grow up not knowing his father's final thoughts were of him. Chen promises he'll deliver the message. I believe him. But even if he can't, even if that line stays buried in classified files forever, what happened on that muddy field mattered. We killed a man, but we killed him with mercy. We acknowledged his humanity even as we ended his life. That's the paradox of war. You can do terrible things and compassionate things simultaneously. Margaret asked me to stay the man she married. I tried. God knows I tried. I don't know if I succeeded. But I know I didn't let the war make me cruel. I kept my capacity for mercy. I chose humanity over regulations. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all we can do. Make small choices to stay human, even when everything around us says become monstrous. Captain Yamada said I was a good man. I hope he was right. I hope when Robert grows up and asks what his father did in the war, I can tell him, your father tried to stay good, tried to show mercy, tried to remember that enemies are humans too. I hope that's enough. He closed the journal, tucked it into his pack, looked up at the stars. Same stars that shone over Oregon, over Japan, over everywhere. Same sky covering enemies who were really just men trying to survive, trying to get home, trying to stay human. Tomorrow he'd start preparing for departure. In 15 days, he'd board a ship. In a month, he'd be home. And he'd carry Captain Yamada's story with him forever. Would carry the weight of mercy shown and life taken. Would carry the knowledge that even in war's darkest moments, humans could choose compassion. That would have to be enough. Pentagon Archives, March 15, 1996. 50 years and 7 months after execution, Colonel David Bradford sat with the declassified files spread before him. The photographs, the witness statements, the paper with one line in Japanese. He'd spent 3 weeks tracking down survivors from that firing squad. 4 were dead, but 3 were still alive. Private Daniel Chen, now 72, living in San Francisco. Former photographer, now retired art teacher. Sergeant Bill Morrison, 73, living in Florida. Former career military, retired as Master Sergeant in 1967. Private Robert Jackson, 71, living in Texas. Former factory worker, retired. Bradford called Chen first. Mr. Chen, this is Colonel Bradford, U.S. Army Historical Division. I'm researching an incident from August 1945, a Japanese prisoner execution. Were you present? Silence. Then, I've waited 50 years for this call. Sir, the classification expired. I can finally talk. Yes, I was there. I photographed it. And I've carried that story every day since. Can we meet? I need to hear what happened. All of it. Colonel, I can do better than tell you. I can show you. San Francisco, March 20th, 1996. Chen's apartment was filled with photographs, decades of teaching art students, documenting life. But on one wall, in a place of honor, hung 3 images, the 3 photographs from August 14th, 1945. I made copies before turning over the originals, Chen explained. Kept them hidden 50 years, waiting for the classification to expire, waiting to tell the truth. Bradford stared at the images, the condemned prisoner, the American lieutenant allowing him to write, the moment after execution. Tell me everything. And Chen did. Every detail. The request to write 1 line. Holloway's decision to violate orders. The 6 minutes of shaking hands forming Japanese characters. The bows exchanged. The execution. Lieutenant Holloway. What happened to him? Went home. Became a teacher again. Portland, Oregon. Taught English for 30 years. Never talked publicly about the war. But I wrote to him once in 1960. Asked if he regretted what he did that day. You know what he said? What? He said, I regret that I had to kill him. But I don't regret giving him dignity in death. We owe that to all humans, even enemies. Especially enemies. Bradford made notes. And the message? The line the prisoner wrote. Chen walked to a drawer, pulled out a worn paper. Not the original. That was in Bradford's Pentagon files. But a copy. Perfect. Every character. I made this 50 years ago. Tried 3 times to travel to Japan, find the Yamada family, deliver it. Each time, something prevented it. Visa issues, family emergencies, lack of money. I failed. I couldn't keep my promise. So the son never received it? I don't know. Maybe someone else delivered it. Maybe the original copy found its way through channels. Or maybe... Chen's voice broke. Maybe that boy grew up thinking his father died a coward, and I failed to prevent it. Bradford looked at the copy. Father fought with honor. Father thought of you at the end. Do not be ashamed. Your name is Yamada. Remember, Mr. Chen, you didn't fail. You preserved this story. You kept the proof that mercy existed. That's worth something. Is it? Is preserving memory worth anything if it doesn't change reality? Yes. Because memory becomes reality. What happened on that field? That becomes how we understand war. How we teach future generations. How we answer the question, can humans stay human in inhuman situations? Florida, March 25, 1996. Sergeant Morrison was waiting on his porch when Bradford arrived. Old now, gray-haired, but still carrying himself like a soldier. You're here about Yamada. Yes, sir. 50 years. 50 goddamn years I've been waiting to talk about this. Morrison gestured to a chair. Sit. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you what it meant. And he did. The same story Chen had told, but from a different angle. Morrison focused on Lieutenant Holloway's face during those 6 minutes, the conflict, the certainty, the choice. He knew he was violating orders, knew he could be court-martialed, but he did it anyway. You know why? Why? Because he understood something most soldiers never learn. Following orders and doing right aren't always the same thing. Sometimes you have to choose, and he chose mercy. Do you think he was right to choose that? Morrison didn't hesitate. Absolutely. War makes us killers. That's unavoidable. But it doesn't have to make us cruel. Holloway proved we could kill with mercy. Could end a life while honoring it. That's important. Even though the prisoner was a war criminal, he was a soldier who'd followed his code of honor, even after surrender was announced. Was that wrong? Yes. Did it deserve execution? Maybe. But did it deserve denial of dignity? No. Holloway understood that distinction. Bradford made notes. What do you want people to know about this? Morrison thought for a long moment. I want them to know that war doesn't have to destroy everything good about us. That mercy can exist even in hell. That one officer's choice to violate regulations mattered more than 1,000 decisions to follow them. Because humanity matters more than bureaucracy. Texas, March 28, 1996. Robert Jackson was the hardest to track down. He'd moved 5 times since the war, never staying long in one place. Bradford finally found him at a veteran support group. Mr. Jackson, I'm researching the Yamada execution. Were you? I was there. I fired one of the 7 shots. One of those bullets killed him. Maybe mine. Maybe not. I'll never know. Jackson's hands were shaking. You want to know if I regret it? Do you? Every single day. That man died because we pulled triggers, but he died with dignity because Lieutenant Holloway gave him mercy. I don't know how to reconcile those 2 facts. They talked for 2 hours. Jackson's story was darker than the others. He'd struggled with PTSD, nightmares, guilt. The execution haunted him more than any combat death. In combat, you shoot to survive. But that execution, we killed a man who was already beaten, already captured, already helpless. The only mercy was letting him write that line, and I've wondered for 50 years, was that mercy enough? What do you think? I think mercy is never enough to erase killing. But it's something. It's proof we tried to stay human. And maybe that's all we can ask of soldiers. That they try. That they choose compassion when they can. That they don't let war make them monsters. Pentagon, April 10, 1996. Colonel Bradford compiled his research into a report. The testimony of 3 survivors. The photographs Chen had preserved. The analysis of what had happened and why it mattered. His conclusion: on August 14, 1945, Lieutenant James Holloway violated direct orders to show mercy to a condemned enemy prisoner. He allowed Captain Takeshi Yamada to write one final line to his son. For this violation, Holloway risked court-martial. The incident was immediately classified and buried for 50 years. Why? Because it complicated the official narrative. Because mercy toward the enemy, especially an enemy being executed, didn't fit the story we wanted to tell about the Pacific War. But this story matters precisely because it complicates. It shows that even in war's darkest moments, humans can choose compassion, that following orders and doing right aren't always the same, that mercy can exist alongside violence. 3 survivors of that firing squad have carried this story for 50 years. They describe it as the most important moment of the war, not because of its strategic significance, but because of its moral significance. It proved they hadn't lost their humanity. I recommend this incident be taught at military academies as a case study in moral leadership. Not to encourage violation of orders, but to emphasize that leadership sometimes requires choosing conscience over regulations. Captain Yamada's final words, written with shaking hands, preserved in classified files, never delivered to his son, were, "Father fought with honor. Father thought of you at the end. Do not be ashamed. Your name is Yamada. Remember." That message, I believe, applies not just to Yamada's son, but to all of us. Fight with honor. Think of those you love. Don't be ashamed to show mercy. Remember who you are, even when war tries to make you forget. This is the lesson of August 14, 1945. Humanity survives if we choose to preserve it. Mercy matters if we choose to show it. And the line between following orders and doing right is one each soldier must navigate alone. Lieutenant Holloway navigated that line with courage and compassion. He chose mercy over regulations, and for 50 years, that choice has been hidden. It's time to bring it into the light, the truth about war. Captain Takeshi Yamada died on August 14, 1945, at 17:03 hours. He died with his hands tied, died kneeling in Okinawan mud, died from 7 bullets fired by men who'd been ordered to kill him. But he also died with dignity, died after writing one line to his son, died after an American officer bowed to him with respect. Both things are true. The brutality and the mercy, the violence and the compassion, the killing and the humanity. That's war, not the sanitized version, not the heroic narrative. The real truth. War is humans doing terrible things while trying to stay human. Lieutenant James Holloway violated regulations to show mercy. For that violation, the incident was classified for 50 years, hidden because it complicated the story we wanted to tell. But now, 51 years later, we can tell the truth. On a muddy field in Okinawa, an American officer chose conscience over orders, chose mercy over cruelty, chose humanity over regulations. And 7 men who witnessed it carried that story for half a century, waiting for the day they could say, "We stayed human." Even there, even then. That's the moral. Not that war is noble, not that killing can be justified, but that even in hell, we can choose compassion. Even when regulations say, "Be cruel," we can choose mercy. Even when everything says, "Become a monster," we can choose to stay human. One line, 37 words, 6 minutes of shaking hands forming Japanese characters. Father fought with honor. Father thought of you at the end. Do not be ashamed. Your name is Yamada. remember. That line was buried for 50 years. But the choice to allow it, the choice to show mercy, that can never be buried. Because 3 survivors remembered, because they refused to let it be forgotten, because they understood that small acts of compassion matter more than grand gestures of cruelty. That's what we take from war, not just the battles won, but the humanity preserved, the mercy shown, the proof that even in darkness, light can survive, if we choose it, if we fight for it, if we remember.